Hi, so the number one area where a lot of Retribution Paladins can make quick and extremely easy progress, and I'm not kidding, this is something you can put right almost immediately, is in the opener. Whenever I've had people post me logs and ask for some guidance, the first thing I always do is look at the opener. I've done some actual videos where I'm analysing some people's logs. There's a playlist about those that you can see later. I'll put a link at the end of the video. But the first thing always to do is go into the opening, and I encourage you to look at your own opener. Get yourself some logs, look at a fight, then click on your name, click on casts, and then click on timeline, and you should see something like this. Now, what this is an example of someone's cast that links their logs on Discord. Some time ago, I'm protecting the names to protect the guilty there, but we can see here this is an opener that is not going to work. So what we'll look at is, this is what I would see. I would see straight away, it's about 3.5 seconds before anything is used at all. So very, very slow into it. There's no reason for that. It should be immediate. Then when we look at what it actually is, okay, Judgment followed by Blade of Justice. Okay, that's fine. So you need Judgment before you can start spending to put the debuff on the target. It also, potentially depending on what your gear is, does quite a lot of damage in its own right as well. Blade of Justice, okay, you need to build some Holy Power. Then they've used Crusader Strike. Right, okay, so if you don't have 4 set tier 20 or 4 set tier 21, then that's a sensible combination of things to do to start with. And then they've used the Templar's Verdict. Now, that would sort of be okay, but for the fact they haven't used Crusade first. You always need to start with your DPS cooldowns. We do a massive amount of damage during that DPS cooldown. And when I say Crusade, I mean Crusade and not Avenging Wrath. We use Crusade in every situation. It doesn't matter what your gear is. If you've only just dinged and you've got your basic leveling gear, Crusade is best. If you've got the best gear available, Crusade is best. If you've got your BIS legendaries, if you've got no legendaries, Crusade is best. If you're doing raids or dungeons or just out soloing, do you know what? Crusade is best. Take Crusade. Now the thing with Crusade is you have to build the stacks really quickly. To start with, it gives you next to no damage increase. You've got to build those stacks. You do that by spending your Holy Power, Templar's Verdict, or Divine Storm, depending on what sort of fight it is. So if they'd put Crusade in there, it wouldn't have been terrible. It's slow because they've wasted several seconds at the start. Also, there's slightly larger gaps than you might expect between these, but I don't know what their haste is for their global cooldown. But in general terms, those 4 things in that order is sort of okay if there was a Crusade between the Crusader Strike and the Templar's Verdict. But then what happens is they use Wake of Ashes. That's fine, okay? They want to build up again. No problem. So now what they should be doing is a Templar's Verdict. But, oh look, they're using a Crusader Strike. Why? It does very little damage, and it doesn't generate any Holy Power, because they've already got 5 Holy Power. And then, a little while later, they do a Blade of Justice. Okay, that does a lot of damage. You actually want to use Blade of Justice as much as possible. Occasionally, it can even be worth overcapping, although generally you want to avoid that because it does so much damage. Particularly if using Blade of Wrath as well, there is another reason to use it as soon as you can, and that is because you are otherwise potentially wasting procs. If you just leave it laying there, then any procs you might get you won't even know about because it doesn't do anything. The proc resets the cooldown, so always have it on cooldown. And then they don't do anything for several more seconds. And this is a disaster of a fight. So now let's look at another one. This is again someone that someone posted on Discord some weeks ago. You'll never go back and find it, I hope. Let's protect the guilty here. So again, I've trimmed it off here. You can't see the knot, but again, there was nothing really done up to this point. It's another one where no one's doing anything for about 3.5 seconds. And then they started off with a Wake of Ashes. Now that's okay under certain circumstances. I'll come more onto that in a moment. That's sort of okay. But now they've again used a Crusader Strike. Again, why? You can't generate any Holy Power. Crusader Strike exists for one purpose only. Generate Holy Power. Alright? If you're going to waste it, the only other situation to use it in is if you've got nothing else you can use. You're waiting for Judgment to come off cooldown. It's got another second or so to come off cooldown. You're full on Holy Power. Alright, use a Crusader Strike. Nothing else to do. That's fine. But generally speaking, it's there to generate Holy Power as a filler. It's not even your highest priority builder. But then they use Crusade at least. So they're okay, there's using their DPS cooldowns. But then they use Judgment. They should have used Judgment before it, really, because Judgment's not really benefiting there. Then they use Shield of Vengeance and Eye for an Eye. They don't even go together. And then another Crusader Strike. Well, now they've wasted 2 Holy Power because they were already on 5 Holy Power from the Wake of Ashes. And now, again, at a very leisurely pace, they're using Blade of Justice. Well, okay, that does quite a bit of damage, but it's 2 Holy Power wasted again. So now they've wasted 4 Holy Power. That Crusade is doing nothing for them at this point. It's giving them 3% extra damage and haste. They're not building up any stacks. Another couple of Crusader Strikes. Now a Judgment again. I mean, why did they even cast the first Judgment? They haven't spent in that window. Before finally, at about 18 seconds, using a Templar's Verdict. Crusade has been active for 12 seconds before they even built any stacks on it. And now it's only got 3 stacks. After 12 seconds, anyone else would have a full 15 stacks at this point. So what should you do? The general priority system for Retribution Paladins in general is you want to build. If you can use a builder and it won't overcap Holy Power, that's what you do. Even if you can spend, if you've got 3 Holy Power, that means you could use a Templar's Verdict. And even if you've got the Judgment debuff on the target, if you can use a Crusader Strike, you use a Crusader Strike. The reason for this is it will help smooth out your rotation later on. Some people, when they complain about having downtime, occasionally you can. Things can just, be bad luck, lack of procs, things like that. But some people, when they have an excessive amount of downtime in their rotation, it's simply because they didn't follow this rule. So you build if you can, as long as you won't overcap. Then you want to spend, of course, with the Judgment debuff. Now, during Crusade, the rules change a little bit. Now you want to prioritise spending whenever you can. It doesn't matter what the source is, and if you've got builders available, with the possible exception of Blade of Justice with Blade of Wrath. So what you want to do is make sure that you've got enough Holy Power to be able to use Templar's Verdict or a Divine Storm as necessary. And you've used Judgment. Once you've accomplished those 2 things, then it's straight into Crusade. Crusade is off the global cooldown. That means you can use it immediately. You don't have to wait for the global cooldown to finish. Use it immediately and then use Templar's Verdict. Okay? And then you want to go into a cycle of building, spending, making sure you use Judgment when you can. Now, there's 3 ways to do this. If you have got your Tier 20 or Tier 21 4 set, and it doesn't matter which one you've got, then to begin with, Blade of Justice will do enough Holy Power to spend, because either it does straight up 3 Holy Power, or by combining it with the Judgment that you'll do at the start as well, you'll only need 2 Holy Power for your next Templar's Verdict. So if you've got either of those set bonuses, then you can use Blade of Justice and Judgment in either order, however it prefers. Then Crusade, then Templar's Verdict. Then Wake of Ashes, then Templar's Verdict. Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict, and so on. If you don't have access to those tier bonuses, then you've got a couple of options. You've got 3 options, in fact. 1, you could combine Blade of Justice with Crusader Strike. That will allow you to get the 3 Holy Power needed. If you're a Blood Elf, you could combine Blade of Justice with Arcane Torrent. That would get you the 3 Holy Power needed. Or you may prefer to just start with Wake of Ashes. Any 3 of those will be fine. But you must follow the general rule of you want Judgment and Builders enough to get a Templar's Verdict off, and then immediately Crusade, Templar's Verdict, Wake of Ashes, unless you've already used it, in which case other builders, and spend. If you've got Soul of the High Lord legendaries, as a lot of top geared Rets will have, then of course you can also get Divine Purpose procs. Now let me show you this next timeline. This is from someone who is one of the top ranked currently on Gorothi Worldbreaker on Mythic. Again, not saying the name to protect the innocent in this case. And look at the timeline. So first of all, you can actually see something looks a bit weird here because you can't see a Judgment at the start, but that's because it's obviously just been cast before it registers as the fight starting. That's just a peculiarity of Warcraft logs. It is even possible that maybe even they ninja pulled with it. Naughty. But nonetheless, they did have Judgment up. So they've started off with Judgment in their case. Now, when would you start off with Judgment? When with Blade of Justice? In reality, it won't make that much difference, but couple of considerations. I tend to start with Blade of Justice because I tend to start close enough to the boss to be able to use that almost immediately. As soon as the fight started, I can use that straight away. If the boss is going to be some distance away and I've got to run to it from a while back, then I could go in with Judgment because it's got a longer range, and then by the time the global cooldown's ready, I should be close enough to be able to use Blade of Justice, and then after that I should be in melee range and it'll be fine. So you need to consider that. It makes no difference which way around you do it in general terms. In the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make a difference. But you want Blade of Justice, Judgment, and make sure you've got enough holy power to be able to use Templar's Verdict. Then immediate Crusade. You can see they've used Crusade here and immediately Templar's Verdict. Now you can see they've used another Templar's Verdict after this. That's from a Divine Purpose proc. You may not get that. But then you'll notice, as I've said before, they use Wake of Ashes, then a Spender, then Crusader Strike, then a Spender. Judgment now needs reapplying. Blade of Justice, Spender. Couple of Crusader Strikes, well, a few Crusader Strikes in this case. Obviously, they've been unlucky here. They've not got many procs. All right, they haven't been getting their Blade of Justice reset from Blade of Wrath. They haven't been getting that many Divine Purpose procs. I mean, they did get one, so they're not actually unlucky on that one. And in this case, so they've had to use 3 Crusader Strikes before they build again. Little bit of downtime there, can't be helped. But nonetheless, they're following the rules that's going to allow them to maximise their damage. And of course, in their case, it worked because they did really good damage on that boss. And if you look in this 15-second window, they were able to hit Templar's Verdict 6 times. If we look at the other two, the first person hit Templar's Verdict 1 time in that time. The other person, not at all. They hit their first one at 18 seconds. And that's a massive difference. They've also used Blade of Justice pretty much on cooldown. They haven't had the cooldown reset from Blade of Wrath, unfortunate. But they would have over the course of the fight and will be using that accordingly. And that's really all there is to it. This is something so simple. Follow this pattern. Make sure you build just enough to be able to use the Templar's Verdict. Judgment, Crusade, and then Templar's Verdict, Wake of Ashes, Templar's Verdict, Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict, and then from there on it depends on your procs, but during Crusade, spend whenever you can. And the reason for this is to begin with on Crusade, you want to build those stacks up as quickly as possible. Remember, every stack is giving you an extra 3% damage and haste. And the haste is actually also crucial because the quicker you're building those stacks up, the quicker you're building that haste up. The haste means that the other stuff's coming off cooldown. And then that means once you've got your full stack, so do you then go into the mode of prioritizing builders? Not necessarily, because those builders are going to come off cooldown so quickly, you can still prioritize spenders a little bit. But obviously you want to use Blade of Justice where you can in there as well, and Judgment. And also, if Crusade's just got a couple of seconds left to go and you're able to spend, you definitely want to spend at that point before it wears off. Once Crusade's worn off, of course, then you go into your usual mode of building if you can, as long as you wouldn't overcap, making sure Judgment's active, and then spend. And that's your general priority. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with other people who might also be interested. If you've got anything else you want me to go over in detail, then put it down below, and that might form the basis of part 2, which is not necessarily aiming to coming out anytime soon. The reason I've called this a part 1 is simply because I may do other videos if people request them. So thanks very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.